DC Multiverse!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today, let's briefly review the Superman, Batman, Flash, Cyborg, and Aquaman action figures based on Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League from McFarlane Toys. As you can see, I've got them all lined up alphabetically, starting with A for Aquaman. So first we have Aquaman. Here is the trading card for Momoa's Aquaman, and the backside obviously has that bio. If you want to pause to read this, it's only a couple sentences. If not, then we shall add it to the stack and look at the figure. Now you're probably wondering why his trident is not in his hand. Well, that's because his hands are stuck in a closed grabby position, and that would go for both of them equally, while the trident is incredibly beefy. So getting the trident in his hands probably means heating up Aquaman's hands and mashing it in his hand. Ordinarily you'd just be like, well, just slide it in top down, but nope, that's not gonna work. Or maybe you just bend the figures, but that's not gonna work either, because these are really hard. So I'm sure you'll see the trident in his hand later on in the video. The folks at McFarlane Toys did more or less get the details correct for his mother's trident, so that's a good sign. And the figure itself looks pretty good. It's got all the details, I suppose, where they're supposed to be, and it's got a nice wash over it. I can't tell if it started out gold and they put the green wash over it, or if it started out green and they put the gold wash over it. I'm gonna say it started out green and then they put the gold wash over it. It is a nice sculpt though. I do appreciate that very much. I think the armor bits hanging down right here are really kind of weird. I'm not digging that very much, but it is sculpted quite nicely and painted, you know, average for what you would expect for a mass-produced toy for retail that costs $19.95. It's not a terrible figure of Jason Momoa, not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not sure if I would put this in the top versions of the character, but for the price point, you kind of have to give it credit where credit's due. The torso is actually a soft rubber on top here, so his pecs are all soft and spongy. And these shoulder pauldrons, they move right out of the way, so you'll see during the articulation segment that these are actually very movable. That face sculpt, it's not too bad, actually. It does have some visual similarities to Jason Momoa, so I'm not going to say it's terrible. It's also not super great either. As for Jason Momoa's hair, it's not too bad, actually. I mean, it certainly could be a lot worse. It's, you know, kind of clumpish on top of his head. So that's what he looks like. Not a bad looking figure all around. Now when it comes to his articulation, and I'll be brief about it, like I said, the hair definitely gets in the way of the ball joint movement. The torso has a fair amount of play. This piece of rubber right here gets in the way. It's as to be expected. The shoulder pauldrons, of course, don't really do much to get in the way, so full range of motion with the arms, the biceps, swivel, the double jointed elbows, the wrists are on those rounded hinges. Down here, there's a full range of motion, groin, front and back, that's pretty good. Rotation, double jointed knees like that, and then of course he's got the ankles and the toe articulation. So yeah, not bad. I can think of McFarlane figures that actually have a worse range of motion, so I would say this is about average. And next up we have the Batman in the tactical suit, and of course he also comes with a trading card, and the Batman in the trading card is not the same as the Batman you see before you. This is tactical suit Batman, and this is beginning of the movie Batman, before he dons the tactical suit. Of course, the back of the card also has the bio, and you can feel free to pause to read that too if you'd like. And Batman also comes with a little tiny Batarang. I suppose I really shouldn't say tiny because this one's actually fairly large. So let's put the card in the stack and look at the figure up close and personal. Those of you who are aware of my channel and have been watching it for quite a while, you'll remember that this whole tactical suit thing, while it's not a terrible look for Batman, and the figure is doing a pretty darn good job of replicating it, I will say that this is done very well. For a $19.99 figure, this is sculpted fantastically. I feel like all the figures in this wave could have actually done with a little bit more paint deco. And I'm aware that it's like a penny for every time the brush touches the figure. So I'm aware that it's expensive to add extra paint deco to your figures. So I understand why it's done so simply. But I feel like those of you who are better at custom painting your figures could really bring out the sculpt of not only this Batman, but all the figures in this series, just by adding some extra paint details and shadows and washes over the figure. Now, I will be the first to say that I'm not a huge fan of Goggles Batman. I really wanted to get the one that had the goggles up, not down. So, yeah, Batman looks like Night Owl. Kind of. The cape is a nice, soft, bendable, skishy rubber, so I like that very much, and I like the fact that the way that it's attached actually looks, you know, fairly reasonable to how it would have appeared in the movies, although I will say I'm not a huge fan of how over-textured this cape is. I understand not making it smooth, but it's so textured, and I would have rather the cape had more of a leathery look to it and less of a, you know, a threadly look to it. Now, unlike Aquaman, who you can't fit the trident in his hand to save your life unless you heat the figure up, the Batarang will fit in Batman's hand. If you try to put it in his hand like that, it's not very tight, but he can hold on to it. And you can also stick the Batarang kind of in his finger. Never mind. Oh, yeah, the fingers don't open enough to stick something in there, which would make these trigger finger hands. Why does Batman have trigger finger hands? Does the variant come with something that has a trigger, or does it just come with the Batarang as well? Oh, well, there's my answer. Not a terrible looking figure, and honestly, one that I wasn't expecting to like the best in this wave. It's probably my favorite figure in this wave. It's pretty well articulated too, with the head being on a ball joint. There's a lot of movement there. The torso is, okay, well, it goes around pretty well and back, but not forward. Not forward to save his life. And the waist, okay. Batman hopefully never has to pick anything up off the floor. Rounded hinges, butterfly joints, double jointed elbows. You got your swivelly biceps there. Your rounded hinges at the wrists. You've got, oh, his leg came right off. Well, that wasn't expected. Well, that's how it's connected on a little peg. We're going to just put that back in there. There's some rotation right here. We know that it's got the McFarlane hinge groin there. You got your double jointed knees, and then you've got your ankles, you know, typical, and your toe articulation. So like I said, pretty good figure, one that I wasn't expecting to like so much in the wave. And now let's move on to Victor Stone, the Cyborg. A character who comes with, of course, a lovely portrait of him standing around looking all ready for a fight. And that open hand, well, that hand means business. That looks like he's about to become a slapping god. Now, as usual, the back of the card has a data file. If you'd like to, you can pause to read his short little story there. And if not, we'll add that one to the stack. And we'll look at his little tiny blurry gun. Come on, camera, you're embarrassing me. Focus. Oh, you almost had it. There you go. Good boy. So there's his, I think this is the Sonic Disruptor. I can't remember what this one is. Basically, his hand turns into this. Is that a hair stuck to it? Oh my god, that's a hair stuck to it. That hair doesn't belong to my dog or anyone in this household. Where did it come from? You'll see just a bit later in the video, after we finish taking a close-up look at the figure, that this bad boy actually attaches to Victor's hand. Now, the Cyborg figure is one that I certainly wanted to be a lot more excited about, and for the most part, visually, I do find myself pleased with his overall look. And for the most part, the close-up detail actually looks really good. Not so keen on the red paint there and how it kind of looks sloppy. Or like somebody chucked a bucket of blood at him. But really that doesn't detract from the overall coolness factor of the visuals of this figure, because like he looks pretty darn spot on for the movie. As far as I can tell. I mean, I haven't got every single close, minute detail of what he looks like in the movie memorized, but, you know, I think he looks pretty good. This version of Victor comes complete with his own version of a cyborg diaper that he wears, and it just kind of, you know, wiggles around like that, and generally looks sort of out of place. Do you push it up, and then his legs have that big gap? I suppose that's what it's supposed to look like, but it constantly wants to fall down, and that's what you get. I do like the paint deco they've used for this figure to give it a very interesting, very metallic look. And again, the sculpting for this guy is on point. I really, really like what they've done with the visuals of this guy. And the face for this Cyborg figure looks convincingly like the actor it's meant to portray. I think out of all the face sculpts of this entire wave, this one is probably the best in my opinion, and the paint deco also looks like it's been applied the most accurately with this one. And just before I move away from the camera, here's a nice close-up look at the back of his head, because there's a lot of details there. Now, just before we look at his articulation, let's pull off his arm at the forearm there, and then just pop the gun on that peg. Ooh, that's a tight fit. Oh, goodness. I'm not even sure if I got it all the way on there. That's a very tight fit. I'm not really sure if this goes this way or if it goes that way, though. I tend to think that that way looks better, but I can't remember. All right, let's pull this off, put his arm back on, and quickly go over his articulation, which is the head gets a really, really good range of motion. So, yeah, flight poses are going to be good for him, at least as far as the head is concerned. The torso, down as usual with McFarlane, is kind of a bit of a disappointment, but back is certainly better. This waist moves very freely, and not all McFarlane figures' waists really move this freely. This is actually really, really good. So flight poses are definitely going to be fairly easy with this guy. His little shoulder pauldrons that are attached right to his arm there, that soft rubber, they obviously move out of the way. Oh, this is a really tight socket there. Butterfly, rounded hinge. Oop, there you go. Not much past 90. And when you let it go, it's not much past 90. And of course you have the hinge on the wrist. It does what they do. You got the groin. Yep, we know what that does. Round and round up here to simulate some kind of a thigh swivel. Double jointed knees. Is that double jointed? I don't know if that is actually. I just assumed it was double jointed. It's not. It's single. He's got a single jointed knee. You can actually see the little ratchets in there, the little nubs that help it to hold its position, but I will tell you that these are already fairly loose, so just a heads up warning. And then Cyborg's ankles, they are different from the other figures in this series. He does have the forward and backward hinge, and it's really, really tight when you first try to move it. It loosens up a little bit. You can hear it clicking away in there, but then he's got an ankle pivot like that, and of course toe articulation. So as you can see, a very posable figure and a very cool looking figure. And now we look at Ezra Miller's Barry Allen Flash, who of course comes with a trading card. And as always, on the back, we've got that data file that, as always, you can pause to read if you'd like to. And if not, we'll stick it in the stack and proceed to look at the figure and all of his little electric running lightning accessories. Flash's lightning accessories are interesting looking. They kind of remind me as if somebody tried to replicate Breaking Bad Heisenberg's blue meth as some kind of Halloween candy. Maybe not. These might hurt the gums. You'll see these softish, bendy rubber lightning effects on Flash later on in the video. But first, well, let's just look at Flash. The sculpt, just like with all the rest of them, is really, really nice. As usual, McFarlane does a fantastic job capturing all of the details, the textures, the nooks, and the crannies of each of the characters it tries to portray. This is one of those figures that absolutely would have benefited from more paint deco, like say going across these diffusers or whichever that he's got on his suit here, these lines, these cables, and maybe some shading on the red. I understand, again, why there's so few paint deco apps on this. Is because it costs a lot of money, but he is fantastically sculpted, and that is enough. This is enough paint deco to, you get the gist, you get the idea of what he's actually supposed to look like. And again, it's a fantastic sculpt. A lot of the fine details really did come out in the molding, so not a lot of complaints there. You got that lightning bolt right there on his chest, looking pretty much like it should. And then you got his face. Mine's a little bit cross-eyed, like this one eye is kind of off to the side. That's sort of weird looking, but in general, it is a fantastic looking sculpt for the head, and there's not a lot of paint deco, and it's pretty good. It's not super great, and it doesn't look a ton like Ezra Miller, but it doesn't not look like Ezra Miller. It's somewhere in the middle. You can see up his nose. Ew. I do kind of wish that this Flash had came with like punchy hands and not just those splayed out running fingers. For those of us who have watched the Justice League, well, we remember that Flash, he looks kind of weird when he runs. I'm just going to say it. I've always thought it. It just looks weird. Kind of like he's perpetually tripping forward. Either way, pretty good looking figure, all things concerned. Now for the articulation, well, let's just find out. He's got the rounded torso up in there, and you know, that's not super great actually. Of course there's rotative motion, but the forward motion is just in the toilet, and the back is not that much better either. Or the side to side. So it's a very hindered figure by the torso. I'm surprised they didn't go with some kind of like rubber, because usually it's like a rubber, but this is like, ouch, it's all hard plastic. And of course, got the butterfly thing, rounded hinge, double jointed elbow. Well, that's pretty good. He can scratch his head with those open fingers, heads on that ball peg. Not a bad range of articulation there. The groin, well, that's what it looks like, and that's what it gets. Typical of McFarlane toys. You got some of this motion, and you got some of that double crunchy motion, as well as the toe and the ankle articulation being a hinge and also a pivot. Not good, not bad, not really bad. Just don't expect much from the whole torso department. Anywho, now let's look at Supes, who clearly comes with a flight stand base. And I haven't been mentioning the figure stands because, I mean, everyone knows they come with figure stands, and he's going to come with that flight base and a trading card, as they all do. It's exactly the same as the previous Superman's trading card, only this one's in full color. And of course, there's a data file on the back that you can pause to read if you'd like to. In the stack you go. Of course, there's the flight base. What can be said about it? We've seen this a whole bunch of times before, so I'll just, yeah. And of course there's the Superman figure itself, which, let's face it, we've pretty much already reviewed this guy, so if you really want to get a good review of the Superman figure, you can just go back to my previous Target exclusive red and blue version of Superman and you can get the full rundown. As with the last one, it's a pretty darn good sculpt. All the details look really, really fantastic with this one. And as with the last one, I feel like McFarlane's done the best job of producing Superman's chest emblem out of all of them that I've seen. I like this one the best. And all of the appropriate details are in all the right places. Not a lot of paint deco here because remember, this is the black suit. You've got that cape just like the last time, great big heavy rubber cape there. Those of you who watched my previous video, you'll remember that the top of my boot was all screwed up on the red and blue variant, and this one doesn't have that problem. It does, however, have the abhorrent waist articulation that the last one had too. Like these little bits of plastic down here get in the way, and there really isn't a lot you can do with this. It's very, very tight. Oh yeah, and then the face sculpt. In comparison to the last one, this one's also just the same. I think the eyes on this one are actually possibly painted a little bit better. But in general, this is very much the same figure, so feel free to check out the previous video, and if not, I'll just give you my final thoughts now. So now that we've gone over all of these figures briefly in this video, the Superman, Batman, Cyborg, Flash, and Aquaman, what do I think about them? Well, you know, they're not the best iterations of these characters. Of course, there are other versions of Cyborg and Flash and Superman and Batman and Aquaman from the movie that are way, way better than these. However, you're going to pay way, way more money for them. For the $19.99 American price point for a McFarlane Toys Justice League set of figures, which for a lot of people out there, that might be the only way they can get the entire set, because SH Figuarts and Mafex and Mezco are way out of their price range. I feel like these are definitely worth it for the money. The bang for buck is there, for the most part. They're not the greatest renditions of these characters, and they're certainly not the worst. I would say they're somewhere in the middle. Out of all the figures, the Batman was my favorite, and the Cyborg and the Aquaman were tied for second place, with Superman and Flash being in third place. So I guess my final thoughts would be, if you see these guys in the wild, and you've been kind of hemming and hawing about them, I feel like they're a worthwhile purchase, as long as you don't expect them to be more than they are. A mid-level attempt at recreating in three-dimensional form the characters from the Justice League movie. These guys cost 20 bucks a fig, and they're worth 20 bucks a fig. Anyway, that's my story I'm sticking to, and hopefully you found this video to be an enjoyable waste of time for the afternoon, and if you did, that's fantastic. I'll see you with the next one. Have a DC day, everybody, and take care.